Hello, cat advocates and caregivers, and welcome to our Advanced Feline Bottle Baby Care webinar. Please note that today's webinar is the second in a four-part series titled Help, I Found a Kitten. My name is Brianna Lovell, Outreach and Events Associate here at Alley Cat Allies. I'm delighted to introduce today's session presented by our friends at Feline Outreach Rescue and Education, a nonprofit organization which provides training to shelters and rescues on increasing the survival rates of rescued kittens. We are joined today by the co-founders of Feline ORE, Susan Spalding and Rosemarie Crawford. Together, they have more than 40 years of experience caring for neonatal and sick kittens in shelters and as foster care providers. Along with other Feline ORE instructors, they teach classes around the country and present workshops at local and national conferences. Your speaker today is Susan Spalding. Helping to moderate today's webinar and answer your questions is Rosemarie Crawford. As we move through the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using the questions panel. Rosemarie will be on hand and doing her best to help. There's a lot of information to cover, and there are a lot of you out there listening, and we will do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. If we are unable to answer your question today, just send an email to either Susan or Rosemarie via the address information provided on the very last slide of this presentation, and they will get back to you. As always, you can also submit your questions directly to Alley Cat Allies by visiting www.alleycat.org/response. Just fill out our online form, which will connect you with the resources and information you need to help the cats in your community. Again, that link is www.alleycat.org/response. Getting help is easy. Just click on the Advice About Cats button to get started. Now, for just a bit of housekeeping. Number one, please note that you can hear us during this webinar, but we cannot hear you. And number two, this webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to access and share the recorded version for free at the conclusion of today's session. So, without further ado, let's send it over to Susan and get started.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Through the magic of technology, I'm coming to you from the Piedmont area of North Carolina, and I'm so glad you were able to join us. First, I want to quickly thank Alley Cat Allies for giving us this opportunity. Brianna and June, thank you for putting up with this all and getting this going. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy day. As Bree said, Feline ORE is a nonprofit, all-volunteer group. Our mission is to provide training, develop educational materials. We do offer some temporary foster care. And last but not least, we promote cooperation between the groups. Together, we speak with a much louder voice. Also, little information, this presentation is not intended to replace professional veterinary care. What we're sharing with you is my 20-plus years experience today in taking care of these tiny ones, and we highly recommend that you establish an ongoing veterinary relationship to help guide you through all the options, drug prescriptions, and that type of thing. Okay, this is an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. If you haven't had the opportunity to view our first webinar, I highly recommend that you do. We're going to do a brief review, but if you really want to learn how to actually feed and care for the tiny ones, that's the one you should watch. Today we're going to talk about weaning. We're going to talk about bathing, we're going to talk about sanitation, and we're going to talk just a little about recognizing some of the problems that you might see with these little ones. Our last two webinars in the series, Rosemarie is going to present a more in-depth coverage of some of the medical issues that you might find. So we're just going to touch on them today. And I always put this slide in because it's such a good example of what just education can do. The picture on the left is obviously the before picture. This little one was recommended for euthanasia by 3 different vets, and coming from their perspective, it probably might not have been the wrong recommendation. However, as you can see to the right, with just a little care by her foster mom and some help and support from Feline ORE, she is now in her new home with her brother Max there in the background. So just the education and the knowledge can make such a huge difference in saving these lives. This is a brief review. Often when you get these kittens in, at least from the rescue and shelter standpoint, they're not in the best of shape. Sometimes the first thing people think about is feeding them, putting a bottle in their mouth. Not something you should consider if they're not stable. So you don't want to feed if they're cold, they're hot, they're dehydrated, lethargic or unresponsive, weak, uncoordinated. Again, all of this is covered in detail in the first webinar, but these are things I wanted to reiterate and say, you know, if you get one of these little guys in and he's not stable and active and ready to go, don't just feed him. The 6 major points that we sort of covered in the first video was warmth and hydration, the first 2. Those are the cause of death for more of the tiny bottle babies than any other 2 things. They can't regulate their body temperature, so you need to provide warmth until they're about 3 to 4 weeks old. Hydration can be life-threatening. They have very little body resources, so they dehydrate very quickly. Again, both of these things are covered in detail in the first. Learning to recognize those is critical to keeping these little ones alive and thriving. Proper feeding and elimination, you need to feed in the prone position, you need to use an appropriate formula, not a homemade concoction, not what they call the cat's milk that's like the sort of a treat for your cat. You need to use actual formula, bottle formula, and you need to keep them clean. You know, Mom cleans these kittens 24/7. We can't keep up with that, but we can do the best we can to keep the kitten clean, the supplies clean, and their environment clean. And recognizing problems early. Just a few hours can make a huge difference in their survival rate for these tiny ones. You can treat more effectively, and it's much more cost effective if you begin treatment early. And this is my bugaboo, and red at the bottom, daily weight checks. If there's one piece of equipment that you should have in your home if you foster these little ones, it's a scale, a postage scale or a food scale, a digital scale. You need to weigh every single day, at least once a day. That goes for orphans and or kittens that are nursing from a mom. That is your first signal. If they're not gaining weight, that is most of the time your first signal that something is wrong. So please visit the Alley Cat Allies website if you haven't viewed the first one, and educate yourself on caring for these little ones. So to get into today's subjects, weaning is always a subject we get lots of questions about. It's a really stressful time for the kitten, so a lot of things begin going wrong or can start showing up at this point in their lives. You want to begin about 4 weeks of age. Most kittens will start being interested in solid food then, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later. Each kitten's a little bit different. You need to be prepared. There's going to probably be some stool issues, meaning a little bit of soft stool. It's stressful for them. They're learning a whole lot of different things at this time. They're learning to use the litter box at the same time. They're beginning to get up, walk around, explore their environment. So a lot of things are going on. It is a natural process. It happens with mom. She continues nursing, but she begins bringing them, they were in the wild anyway, bringing them food, or they start going to the food dish with her if they're in a foster situation. That's how I choose to do it. I don't just expect them to change immediately from the bottle to food. I will start offering food, supplementing with the bottle a couple times a day. I generally will use probiotics. We'll talk more about that later, simply because, again, usually with foster kittens, particularly orphans that you've been bottle feeding, you're starting this process maybe a little earlier than you normally would or that mom normally would. They should already be beginning to use the litter box. We'll discuss that in detail a little later. And you need to be patient. Each kitten is a little bit different. I've had kittens that it's 6, 7 weeks old before they actually, I feel confident that they're getting enough nutrition from the solid food that I can totally stop the bottle. And as the picture shows, that's one of Rosemarie's little previous fosters. It's messy, messy, messy. That's only looking at one end. Believe me, the other end will probably look just as messy. And so you're going to be spending as much, if not more, time keeping them and their environment clean as you are feeding them or doing anything else with them. So again, we're going to begin at about 4 to 5 weeks old, and you need to remember, you need to learn to estimate your age. These little guys in this picture are about 4.5 weeks old. We have a very detailed section on that again in our first webinar. And if you've been bottle feeding, remember the food's been coming basically from their perspective from above, and all of a sudden you're asking them to look down and get this food. Huge change for them. The food's been warm, it's been liquid. So again, all of this stuff is changing for them, including the taste, the texture. Each kitten is a little different. Some of them, you offer food one day and the next day they just don't want the bottle. They look at you and say, hey, I don't have to wait for you, lady. The food's fine. You need to offer both wet and dry, and we'll talk more about what kind a little bit later. Always, always offer clean water. Usually takes them a little bit longer to start drinking water, which again is another reason for continuing to offer the bottle, to make sure they continue getting the fluids they need. The water is going to get as dirty as everything else. They're going to drop food in it, they're going to walk in it, they're going to play in it. So you may need to change your water at least 2 or 3 times a day, just whenever it needs it. And you need to watch really, really closely. Some kittens, they go over and you think, oh, they're eating great, but they're just sort of sucking at it and not really getting any nutrition. And if necessary, use separate bowls and watch while they eat. And again, red at the bottom, my bugaboo, daily weight checks. You need to continue weighing daily. Okay. The weight checks should be as for the mom-fed, if you've got the mom-fed kittens as well as the orphans. I do sometimes expect a little bit of a plateau in the weight as they're learning to eat, but you should not have a weight loss. Okay, some of the supplies you need your bowls, and I sort of took a picture of sort of a collection of the different ones that I've gotten from the Bed Bath & Beyond and the dollar store and thrift stores, etc. But notice all of them have reasonably low sides. They're all stable. And the other thing people don't think about, they need to be, at least the food bowls, wide enough so that the kitten's whiskers aren't squished in. Their whiskers are very sensitive, and sometimes they just don't want to get those whiskers down into bowls. So this one up at the top here, that's just a little custard bowl. It's pretty heavy. I use that for both water and dry food. And then down here at the bottom, these sort of low, flat bottom dishes are the ones that I tend to use for the wet food. And you can adjust the size to however many kittens, or use all small ones if you're providing separate bowls for everyone. And sometimes if a kitten seems like he wants to eat but he's not real sure, I'll sort of change bowls. Try maybe this one because it has the sides are sort of splayed out as opposed to straight up and down. Amazingly, sometimes that does make a difference. This is when I start using the probiotics. My favorite is Fortiflora because they like the taste of it. You can mix it in with their food daily, with their wet food, and it doesn't bother them to eat it. And you need to use age-appropriate food, both wet and dry. The wet food, you need to use a good quality canned kitten food. It needs to be nice and creamy, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. And the dry, I do have a preference for the dry, quite honestly. I am a big fan of the Royal Canin Baby Cat. It's a little pricey, however, it's very tiny kibbles, and probably 25 to 30% of the time, those little guys will go for that dry kibble before they even go for the wet. The advantage there is you can leave the dry in. It doesn't go bad, whereas with the wet you have to, of course, leave it in for a little bit, let them eat, and then take it out. It's not near as messy when you do leave it in there. And it's size appropriate. It's very tiny BB shaped. So with the wet food, you want a smooth consistency. You can warm it up to make it a little more palatable for them. You can mix it with a little bit of water or formula to make it a little more creamy if necessary. The dry, like I said, I really like the baby cat kibble, but whatever you use, it needs to be a good quality dry food. You can actually soak the kibble in water or formula. Don't make it squishy, but make it a little softer if you think that would tempt them. Another quick trick is human baby food, chicken or turkey flavor, no additives, no onions, spices, or anything, just plain chicken or turkey baby food. If you just smear a little bit on the top of the wet food, sometimes that's just the catalyst that'll get them going. You want to make sure, we talked a little about this, sure that they're all eating. And that means the weighing every day. If you need to use separate bowls, continue supplementing with the bottle, which is how I choose to do it. Some people like to mix the formula in. I think it makes it really messy. One trick there that you can use is if they're in a condo or a room, people will use a big plastic tub and they'll actually do the feeding of the wet food in the tub while they're cleaning the condo or whatever area the kittens are in. Then when they're finished eating, they'll clean the kittens up and put them back in their condo. And that keeps the condo itself a little bit cleaner. One of these days I'm going to clean out a condo, put the kittens back in it, take a picture, and then take a picture 2 hours later. The difference is, anyone that's done that knows that the difference is tremendous just in the 2 hours for kittens this age, the way they walk through everything. The other methods, like I say, you can mix the formula with the wet food. I choose to sort of stay with what I consider the natural cycle, like Mom would do it. Give them the food and then give them the formula separately in a supplemental bottle. We get questions sometimes about the second step formulas, which are sort of the weaning formulas, and they're absolutely fine to use. I don't find them necessary. I've had some donated and I use them and it works just fine. It's basically just another formula that has a little bit different ingredient list in it. And again, down at the bottom, I didn't make this red, but you continue your daily weight checks. Okay, litter box. I love this picture on the right. A friend of mine sent it to me. And litter box is going to begin about the same time period. I start offering a litter box at approximately 3 weeks. If you notice that what they'll start doing as they get more mobile is they'll actually start going to a certain corner of their condo or their carrier or their whatever you have them in, and they'll be going in that general area. If they're starting to do that, you need to offer a litter box. It's instinctive. I've never had to teach a kitten, despite what the picture on the right looks like. I've never had to teach a kitten to use the litter box. They may miss a few times at first, but they basically, sometimes they never miss. They sniff at the litter box, walk over, and do their business. So just offer them the litter box. They will not cover it first, which is one of the reasons it makes it so messy. They'll walk right through it and walk out, then walk through their food, play a little bit, get it all over their siblings. So it's going to be a messy time. You should check their stool every day. You know what's going in because you're feeding them, the wet food, the dry food, the formula, whatever. You need to also check what's coming out of them. It's very indicative of any concerns or problems that they may be having. And you use non-clumping litter. I highly recommend you use non-clumping litter to begin with. The clumping kind can get stuck in their nose, stuck in their fur. If they swallow it, it can swell up and get stuck in their gut. So I use the very inexpensive white clay litter. The other reason I use that, as you can see at the bottom, you can see everything in that white clay litter. If there's any blood in the stool, whatever color the stool is, it's very easy to tell, and that's really important. If, and occasionally I have this, a kitten tends to play in it or almost doesn't really eat it, but tends to like want to chew at it, I will switch to well, I use horse pellets because it's cheaper and it's the same thing, but the feline pine, something large like that, again, that's not clumping, but they're not as apt to chew on it. Another great tip is to use disposable boxes. As you can see at the bottom, what's there is a cardboard box, and that's actually a box from the bottom of a case of cat food. Of course, with as many fosters and my own cats as I have, that's not a problem for me to get, and I pick up all the empty ones when I go to the pet store to buy food. But it's much, much easier and more time effective for me because it's going to get messy. You may have to change the litter box 2, 3, 4 times a day. And this way, if it's clean enough, I can dump the litter out and use it. I only use about 1/4 inch of litter, just enough to cover the bottom. Excuse me. And you can dump that out if the litter box itself is clean, put it back, but it's usually not going to be clean. So this way I can just dump the whole cardboard box, dump it out, put a new cardboard box in. You can also use things like shirt boxes, anything that's disposable. It's just a lot easier on you as many times as you're going to need to empty this litter box. And again, check that stool every day. Okay, onward and upward bathing. This is another question we get a lot. It's absolutely safe if done correctly. You can do a full bath. You can do a little butt bath if they're having trouble keeping themselves clean on the rear end. They usually will start grooming, but not until about 5 weeks or so in my experience, maybe even a little longer. So at that point, again, in nature, mom is keeping them totally clean. And she's doing it 24/7. So you're going to have to pick up on it as best you can. And it's almost always necessary at some point between diarrhea, fleas, foreign matter. When I get my little guys in, if they smell the least bit weird, you never know where they've been. They could have been in a truck motor, in a shed with chemicals. Heaven only knows. And in my personal opinion, it's the only safe way to get rid of fleas on ones that are weigh well less than 1 pound, which is what I see most often. I'm not comfortable with chemical remedies to fleas at this point in time. Occasionally we'll go off label and use 1/4 of a Capstar if the vet feels it's okay if the fleas are really bad. But fleas are life-threatening to these little guys, and you need to get rid of them. And bathing is the best way to do it. I do use Dawn regular dish liquid. Remember that Dawn now makes like 12 different products, so you want to make sure you get the regular dish liquid, and I believe it still says on the label, you know, as used by the wildlife people. If you do choose to use a veterinary shampoo, make sure, read every word on that label, and make sure it's only for cats, or it's safe for cats and kittens. Dog shampoo is not safe for cats and kittens, and a lot of times can be toxic to them. If I were you, I'd just stick with the regular Dawn dish liquid. You need to dry them well. The biggest thing you want to prevent with bathing is chilling. So you need to keep them in a warm environment, dry them well. We'll have some videos, hopefully in a few minutes. It'll give you a little bit more hands-on view. Big thing, keep warm before, during, and after, and that means before you start, you have a nice warm carrier ready to put them in. Avoiding the eyes and ears, and then check their hydration afterwards, because even though most kittens, if you do it properly, aren't going to have a problem with bathing, they can get a little stressed, so you want to monitor their hydration afterwards. Okay, before the bath, you can keep bathing to a minimum by doing cleaning on a daily basis. You need the flea comb, one of the flea combs with the very tiny, very close together tines is a great investment. And remember again, mom's doing this 24/7. You want to keep their eyes clean. I think the reason a lot of us in rescue see more of the conjunctivitis, even if it's not associated with a full-blown upper respiratory, is that mom cleans those eyes constantly as they're getting ready to open, as they're opening. And we need to do that every day with a damp cloth, keep their eyes clean until they start grooming themselves. You want to pay special attention to the paws. They get stuff caught between their toes. I've actually had kittens come in that had infections between their toes because they'd gotten gunk stuck in between and nobody had removed it. So you need to make sure to keep that and their claws clean. And of course their anal area, because again you're probably going to be dealing with some soft stool as they start going. If you're doing bottle babies, that you start going from you stimulating them to eliminate to them going on their own. Again, they're not cleaning themselves totally yet, and they can actually get a diaper rash and get some red irritation and lose hair in that area. I highly recommend, especially with long hairs, that you trim the hair around their anal area. It grows back very quickly, but it helps you keep them cleaner and it helps them keep themselves cleaner. And of course, keep it as dry as possible. Even if they're going on their own, check and make sure it's remaining dry. Okay, we're going to try this video. You may have a little bit of a problem with it depending on your internet speed, but we're going to give it a try. And if nothing else, I want to show you certain areas on it. Here we go. Okay, this is Alvin. You can see here Alvin's, he just came in the day before we took this video. He's quite dirty. He's got a lot of mats. It's hard to see, but he's got mats and stool. Another area to be really vigilant for is what I call the heels, right down this area here. The heels, because of the way they walk, those tend to get a lot of stool stuck on them. And what I will do before I give Alvin his bath is what I call my pre-bathing. You can see in the background here I have the carrier already set up. This is the flea comb I was talking about, and because stuff gets stuck on there and their poop is really sticky, if you get a lot of the loose debris and big chunks off first with the flea comb, it's much easier to get them clean when you actually do the bath. Excuse me. So as you can see here, we're getting a lot of excess little stuff off particularly his rear end. And here I have a pair of very sharp but rounded-ended scissors. I'm also a quilter, so these are little applique scissors. And I'm just going to trim a little bit around here. After you bathe and when it's wet, you can trim again. A little easier to see, but believe me, this will save you a lot of time and trouble in keeping him clean. And you can see that one big mat there that will get off when we're bathing him. But you can also cut off any mats. Again, long hairs tend to be much more of a problem, obviously, than the short-haired ones. So little Alvin was quite nice that day. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide here. Oops. There we go. So this is what we just talked about, sort of what I call my pre-bath routine. You want to get your carrier prepared and warmed. And what I do is just put my snuggle snafe, my rice sock, whatever I'm using as a warmer in there. Make sure it's nice and warm. I have a small little heater that I keep on my counter when I'm doing baths. And I try and do a lot of baths in one day because I set up for it. So you prepare the carrier, have a towel ready to go over it, so you basically have a nice dry sauna for them when they finish their baths. You want to gather all your supplies because you don't want to go walking around the house looking for the supplies with a wet kitten in your hand because he'll get chilled. So you want to get your flea comb, your scissors, paper towels, your bath towels and washcloths, Q-tips, tweezers if you're looking at removing fleas or ticks. I do use a hairdryer. I have very few kittens that panic with it. If they do panic, I will turn it off and just dry with towels, but most of them get used to the noise. And I have it set up, you'll see in one of the videos, I have it set up so the handle is in a heavy glass so that it's a hands-free kind of thing for me. You can buy ones that actually come on stands that groomers use. And then I always clip their nails while I'm doing it. As long as you're doing it, you might as well do it all. So you want to use the flea comb to remove the loose debris. You want to clip the hair around the anal area. Even on short hairs, it just makes it a lot easier to keep it clean. And you want to remove the large mats and debris so that's out of the way when you start your actual bath. Okay, So this is our bathing one. Okay, the biggest thing I can tell you is never, ever, ever, ever put the kitten under the water without your hand going under there first. I don't care how much you trust your water heater. The most awful feeling in the world is to put that kitten under there after you've had him out, rinsing him, and the water's cold or too hot. The water needs to feel very warm to you. Remember, the kitten's temperature is higher than your temperature, and your extremities, your hands, are going to be cooler anyway. So the water needs to feel very warm. You need to support the kitten properly. With small ones like this or smaller, you can actually scruff them like Mom does. With the bigger ones, you want to support them underneath so that their legs aren't wiggling and they're not being quite so wiggly. If they are really wiggly or you don't feel comfortable holding them, you can actually fill a bowl with warm water and sit them in the bowl. It's a good way to do it too if you feel like you've got something on there that you need to soak off first. And believe it or not, some kittens, their fur almost seems like it's waterproof. So make sure that you get it wet all the way down to the skin, especially if you're doing the flea picking thing. Much easier to see those fleas when the fur is very wet. So you want to make sure you avoid their eyes and ears. Here I'm making sure that I'm getting their paws and claws, and that's in between this area is where the stuff gets really stuck. As we go along, you'll see that again, my hand is always under the water with the kitten or goes back under the water before I put the kitten under there. Okay, I think that's probably enough of that one. So during the bath, you want to constantly check the water temperature, and it should feel very warm to your hand. You want to support the kitten comfortably. You want to use your regular Dawn dish liquid. You want to be careful of their eyes and ears. And you want to pay special attention to their paws and claws, the anal area, and that heel area I was talking about, because it just seems like that is where a lot of stuff gets stuck. And don't be surprised, especially if it's a new kitten you've got in and they've had a lot of this debris stuck on them, stool or whatever it might be for a long time, if hair actually comes out when you remove the debris. I've had them have almost naked hind legs when I finish getting the debris off. You're not pulling the hair out. The hair is actually coming out. You know, it's just falling out. So be aware of that. It will grow back very quickly, but sometimes if you don't keep it really clean, the hair will come out when you do clean it. Okay, our next video is doing the face. This is a little bit different. What I do is I use a white cloth, and I highly recommend you use white or very light colored cloths, towels and washcloths. That way you can see what's coming off. If you have a lot of flea dirt on there, the water will literally run red, and your towels and washcloths will be rusty colored. Any blood, any odd colored stuff. It also means that when it's running clear, you've gotten all the dirt off. But notice that I'm cleaning specifically around the eyes really well, under the chin. If you've got bottle feeders, no matter how well you wash right after bottle feeding, there's a little bit of formula that'll get stuck on there, so you want to make sure you get that off. And then I rinse one last time. And notice how I'm holding the ears forward so the water doesn't get in the ears. Rinse one last time because you want to make sure you get every bit of soap residue or anything you're using off. Okay. All right, so when the facial area, you want to use a warm, damp washcloth, and you can do this every single day. And I do it every single day, often every time after I'm feeding if the bottle babies are getting really dirty. Pay special attention to the eye area. You can also gently clean their ears, the outside of their ears, with a Q-tip. You don't want to use any oil or alcohol-based type things because the oil will actually get in there and collect dirt, and the alcohol will dry it out. It's a good time to check for ear mites to see if there's dirt in there and see if they need to be treated for that. Again, if they're too young to use anything for treatment, the best thing you can do is just use your Q-tip to very gently clean the outside of the ear as best you can. You want to make sure you clean around the nose, and you want to wipe the mouth area. Okay, and the last one here is drying. and this is really important, and I tend to just sort of squish all the water off that I can. And again, especially with long hairs, you can have a lot of that. And then I'm a big fan of using paper towels. They are great at just soaking up as much of that excess water as you can. And you can see how much is coming off there. And I get them as dry as I can with the paper towel. And then I turn my hair dry. Actually, I should have turned my hair dry on a little sooner, but you see how I have it sitting in a can, so it's hand or a glass there, so it's hand-free. And I use it diffusely. It's blowing right here, so it's warming up the towel and the area where I'm going to be drying Alvin. But it's not going to be blowing directly on him. Any of you that have used a hairdryer know that if you hold it up against you and blow on your scalp, it's going to burn. So again, just like with the water, I never have the hairdryer blowing directly on the kitten unless, oh, and I'll interrupt here. A lot of times you'll find that they want to urinate because you're stimulating them as you're drying. So don't be surprised if that happens. And sometimes they'll even have a bowel movement. So anyway, I've got my towels here that are dry and warm. The air is blowing out here diffusely and then blowing onto the kitten. My hand is right there so I can feel where it's going, and I'm going to just dry, dry, dry. This is sort of a long clip, so we're probably not going to go through the whole thing, but you want to get them totally dry down to the skin. Now here is where I'd stop if this kitten was infested with fleas, because it is easier to see the fleas when the hair is a little bit more damp. You can back comb it and see the fleas and actually pick them off with your tweezers. So anyway, you want to dry under their arms there. That's a place. And then here I come. Okay, you can back comb with a comb and brush. This was a comb and brush set I bought at the dollar store. It's sort of a carry in your purse kind of thing. Anyway, it helps, again, get all of any debris that might be left out and any loose hair. Again, they're not grooming themselves. Mom's not grooming them. And just like with an adult cat when it grooms, all the excess hair that's supposed to come out comes out, and they're not doing that yet, and Mom's not doing it for them, so you have to do it. And you can see the little excess hair that's coming out in the comb there. So anyway, you're going to keep going and keep going until they're totally dry, and then you're going to put them into the carrier back here that's already nice and warm. And see, here's the heel area. That's where a whole lot of stuff gets stuck. And then once they're dry, you can clip their claws very quickly. There's more stuff on the heel area. I hope you guys are being able to see this video pretty good. And again, I'll use the flea comb. It's a pretty good view of the flea comb there. So anyway, that's pretty much finishes your bath up. We're going to stop because and that's where I'm getting the heel area again. And you can see this is the area in between the toes down here that you want to make sure is really clean. Okay, so drying, you want to use paper towels to absorb as much of the liquid as possible. Use light colored towels so you can see what's coming off the kitten. Keep the area warm. You want to use indirect or diffuse heat as much as possible. If you do use the hair dryer blowing on them, then make sure your hand is in front of that heat so you can feel how warm it is. I do have a small, inexpensive little electric heater that I can keep on the counter to keep the general area warm. And dry thoroughly, dry thoroughly so they don't get chilled. Then you place them in the warm, prepared carrier. At that point in time, even if they're in the carrier for a little bit, I'll offer a litter box and some water, maybe a little food, depending on whether it's their time to eat or not. But you want them to be comfortable with it. I find most of my kittens have no problem with bathing as long as you're confident about it. You don't leave them hanging, and you keep the water warm. Keep them comfortable. Okay. That's the end of bathing. So we're on to cleaning and sanitation, which sort of goes right along with bathing. We're keeping the kitten clean. Now we need to keep his area clean. And there's cleaning versus disinfecting. Cleaning is when you use hot soapy water to get all the debris off, scrub it off, and it looks clean. And then disinfecting actually is when you use something to kill any pathogens that may be left. Bleach is my #1 product to use. There are other commercial products out there. Just make sure if you use something other than bleach that you're aware of what it kills, how you have to use it. You need to use it properly. Okay, and bleach, you dilute the bleach depending on what you're cleaning and what you're trying to kill, any place from 1 to 10 to 1 to 30. Bleach, you can't just wipe and spray. The bleach has to sit in order to be effective and kill what you're trying to kill. The bleach has to sit for a minimum of 10 minutes in order to be effective. So you can't just spray the bleach on. And I've had this question before too. Clorox, which is the #1 name when people think of with bleach, not all Clorox products contain bleach. Clorox is a brand name. So make sure what you're using contains bleach and contains bleach at the right percentage. And you want to clean everything. And that includes your cages. Remember the bars to your cages, which are sometimes a real bugaboo to clean. Temporary holding areas like your carriers, boxes if you use tubs for them to eat in. Now you may not use, I personally don't use Clorox on my bottles and nipples, but I do clean them with hot soapy water and then I boil them. I put them in a Pyrex measuring cup and boil them in the microwave. Bowls, litter boxes, hopefully you're using mostly disposable, but if you're not, those have to be cleaned, disinfected. Bedding and toys. Bedding needs to go through if you have a sanitized cycle on your washing machine, needs to go through the sanitized cycle with bleach. If I have bedding that's really soiled or if I have really sick kittens, sometimes I'll just throw it out. Bedding is cheap to buy at the thrift stores, not worth taking the chance, but it certainly can be bleached and used again. Toys are another thing. I get a lot of toys donated, but unless they're washable and bleachable, they're a one-time thing for that particular kitten, and once they get dirty, they have to be thrown out. So buy things or ask for things that you can clean. And then you have to think about your physical area, things like doorknobs, light switches, the brooms that you sweep with, medication bottles, that kind of thing. Anything that you might have picked up or might have become contaminated, you need to make sure you keep clean. On the doorknobs, what I've started doing in my kitty rooms, I have 2 kitty rooms, one's for the total bottle babies, one's for the older guys. The kitty rooms, I've started actually putting disposable gloves on some of the doorknobs to help keep them clean. Light switches, there's not too much you can do, but make sure you keep them clean. Brooms, I was never a big fan of brooms. I use a vacuum cleaner, garage vac, where I can actually take off the wand and put it in bleach, but brooms can be soaked in a bleach solution and then turned upside down to dry. Medication bottles and things like that, if you're doing more than 1 litter, or even if you're just doing 1 litter, before you start feeding at night, get a whole tray. I have little trays that I set up, and before I get my hands on any of the kittens, or I might get my hands contaminated, I set up all the medications on that tray for that kitten. If he's getting an antibiotic, if he's getting his Fortiflora, his bottles made up, or his food, it's all sitting on that tray. So once I go to that kitten station and put my gloves on, I'm not touching anything else. It's all right there for that one group of kittens. And then don't forget your human contact if you're in a what you might call a commercial situation, like a shelter or a physical building. You need to make sure your employees, your volunteers, and your adopters know what the rules are as far as handling kittens, particularly if you have a sick room. If you're at home fostering and you have kids, nothing is better than having kids that can play with the kittens and socialize them. But you need to have certain rules, especially if the kittens have an upper respiratory or have some stool issues. Make sure the children are old enough and they understand what the cleanliness situation is and what the rules are. And for yourself or anybody else, eyeglasses, jewelry, watches, hair bands, anything that you might touch after touching that kitten. I do use gloves as a matter of course when I have sick kittens. However, remember, just because you're wearing gloves doesn't mean the gloves don't become contaminated and can be just like your hands. So, like I say, be prepared. Just think ahead. Okay, we're actually going pretty good on time. Early recognition of illness, and I'm going to read this word for word because I think it is so important to understand. In young kittens, early recognition of illness followed by proactive, assertive treatment can be the difference between life and death. That is literally what happens. Okay, the most prevalent thing you're going to see in kittens is usually stress-related, and any of the following, the diarrhea, the upper respiratory, or any challenges they may have, usually start out from a stressful situation. And the stress can be physical, as in an illness, or as we talked about with weaning, or learning to use the litter box, or just growing up. It's stressful. And it can be environmental. It can be noise. It can be smells. It can be moving to a new condo or a new foster home or moving into an adoption room. All of these things can begin to can begin the process of having soft stool or getting a URI because it lowers their immunity. And these little guys a lot of times don't have a very mature immune system anyway. So the stress can be physical, it can be environmental. Diarrhea is something you almost always see. I can count on one hand of the probably over 2,000 kittens I've done over the years, one hand, that's less than 5, the amount of kittens that didn't have some stool issues at one point or another, either right away when they came in from stress or at some point during their foster time. And you have to realize that diarrhea is a symptom, not a disease. So you can treat the diarrhea, try and get rid of it, but in the meantime you've got to also figure out what's causing it. It may be something very simple like the change in food or the change from formula to food. Or it could be something as serious as upper respiratory or panleukopenia. So you need to keep track of it. Diarrhea, technically diarrhea is probably uncontrolled stool, where they're not able to control when it comes out. But we sort of consider soft stool all in that one little definition of the word diarrhea. It can be caused by any digestive upset. I find that even changing, for example, KMR comes in both a liquid and a powder formula. And a lot of times a person that rescues a kitten, a lay person that rescues a kitten, will just run to the store and he's not expecting to keep this kitten, so he'll buy a can of the liquid KMR, which is fine. But then when they get to the foster, usually the fosters are using the powder because it's more cost effective if they're doing bottle babies. And even changing from that same KMR brand from liquid to powder, I find there is some digestive upset. And so you can imagine changing brands, changing from formula to food, all of that can cause digestive upset, which is going to cause some soft stool. So you need to learn again. In our first video, we talk about the different colors of the stool and the different the first webinar, sorry, different consistencies. So you can go back and check on that. The other thing that you most often see is an upper respiratory infection, which is a viral infection. It's like us getting the cold or the flu. It can be anything from very minor watery eyes and runny nose to very serious pneumonia. It is a viral infection. However, we highly recommend you talk to your vet about treating with antibiotics while you're trying to get rid of the viral infection, simply because most kittens, in fact all in my experience, get a secondary bacterial infection along with this viral infection, and that's what the antibiotics will do. You can also give them your probiotics and that kind of thing, but you need to treat the whole kitten, not just the viral. Rosemary will probably be talking in some of our other videos about nebulizing and different treatments for upper respiratory. But the big thing we want you to understand here is you need to recognize it immediately and either talk to your foster coordinator or your vet about beginning treatment right away. The earlier the better. Okay, the early recognition, again, the symptoms you're looking for are lack of weight gain. I should have put that in red along with weighing every day. The lack of weight gain, is your first sign that something's not right. Kittens should be gaining weight every single day. Loss of appetite, same thing. At their feeding time, kittens are hungry. I don't care whether they're 1 day old or 1 year old. They're hungry. Glassy or runny eyes. It may simply be an irritation. If you're keeping it clean, you'll see less of it, but it can also be a precursor, the first symptom of upper respiratory. Diarrhea, again, soft stool or changes in stool. If they've had reasonably good medium brown stool and all of a sudden it's runnier and yellow, that's a change. Lethargy. Kittens, again, even 1 day old kittens are active. So if some more than others, but you know these kittens. You know if they've been playing 3 or 4 hours a day and suddenly they're just laying in their bed. Something's wrong. Vomiting. There's different kinds of vomiting. If they're just throwing up food with no retching, it could just be an upset tummy, or they ate too fast, or they ate too much. But anything with retching or blood or bile, something that you absolutely have to be aware of. You need to have a system in place for recording these symptoms. You're not going to remember from 1 day to the next, even if you just have 1 kitten you're fostering. There are lots of different things you can download from the internet even that you can keep track. You need to be keeping track of their weight daily anyway. So just make little notes. Monday, the stool was good. Tuesday, it was a little bit yellower. Wednesday, it was runny. Ate well today, didn't eat well. Ate well at 6 a.m., didn't eat well at noontime. Anything. You can't have too much information. Your vet or your foster coordinator will love you for it. It's much easier for them to decide on a course of action if they know what you've done and when it happened. It is much more effective and less expensive to treat early. Again, be proactive and aggressive. Learn to recognize the signs and then treat the signs. And you can prevent a lot of this with what we just talked about, the sanitation. Quarantine is also important. You shouldn't mix litters or mix those kittens with your own cats. There's so much that you can't see going on with them. You never know, and a lot of these things are very contagious. And also with vaccination on schedule. We highly recommend that you visit the UC Davis website and download their shelter medicine vaccination protocol. It is different from the normal protocol, shelter medicine vaccination protocol. Okay, the other thing that you're going to need is veterinary support. It's really, really important, and it's a mutual working relationship. Ask your vet outright, even one that you're happy with your own adult cats might not be comfortable working with neonates, or there might be someone in the practice who is more comfortable working with neonates. I find that the most successful partnerships that I've had with vets are ones that I'm right up front with. This is what I do, and this is what I need. And a lot of them are very excited about it because if they're willing to learn and do research, they learn right along with you. And they need to be able and willing, in my estimation, to think out of the box a little bit. A lot of the treatment protocols that my vets and I have worked up for these little guys are basically off-label, and I put that in parentheses. It's even if it's medications or treatments used for older kittens, it's never been tested or tried on these tiny ones because it just doesn't happen that often. And most vets will willingly admit that they're not given a great deal of training in school, if any, regarding these little tiny ones. And from a foster perspective, you need to respect the vet's time. You can't expect to walk in and take up an hour of time discussing this kitten. Bring your written records with you. Be prepared to talk to him about what you need. And you need to respect their limitations. Veterinarians cannot just hand out medication willy-nilly. There are not only laws and regulations, but there's just ethical considerations. And you need to respect the fact that they just can't hand over a bottle just because you want it. So go in, talk to them. If it's needed, you can work out some way to get the medications you need. Do your own research. My vets are absolutely thrilled when I come in with stuff that I've researched off the internet from, I use sites like Cornell and UC Davis and so on, and the research that they've done, because that means he has a head start on it. He has sites he can go to that lay people can't, but I've gotten him started. This is what I think's wrong with this kitten. And remember, you're that kitten's voice, and you're the one that knows that kitten better than anyone. Be prepared. That means taking in your written notes about what happened, when it happened, what you've done to treat it so far, given Fortiflora, added rice cereal, whatever. And then when you decide on a treatment plan, follow that treatment plan. If you are not going to follow that treatment plan, do not walk out of that vet's office saying you will. If you're not comfortable with the plan, talk it over with the vet again. Because if you don't follow the plan, if you just give the meds for a couple of days and say, oh, this isn't working, it's just as dangerous as not doing anything at all. So make sure you're comfortable with the plan, you know what you're going to do, you have everything you need to do it, and then ask questions. When should I notice a difference? Should I notice an improvement in 24 hours? What are the side effects? If he starts vomiting, should I stop giving the medication? If you're not familiar with what you're doing, no question is too small to ask. These little guys don't have the option of saying, oh, let's wait a couple days and see. They've got to be treated proactively. So all of these things become a relationship that is absolutely amazing when it works well. And this is one of my amazing partners in Virginia in the picture. Okay, here are some reference sites. The internet is absolutely amazing for research, but please use a little common sense. There are some really weird sites out there. These are certainly not all of the good ones. These are just ones that we think are absolutely great, but there are other ones, and I'm not saying don't go a little further and think out of the box. I'm just saying use a little common sense when you get your information. And if it's information you're not familiar with or you're not sure of, don't just do it. Check with your vet, check with your foster coordinator, check with someone who's used it before or is familiar with bottle babies or kittens. So any of those. Okay, and here's my picture again, because with all of this information and other education that you have, you can make the difference. You can save an amazing, amazing amount of lives just through knowing a few simple things. Okay, Feline Outreach, Rescue, and Education. We've been thrilled to be able to bring this information to you today. Thank you again to Alley Cat Allies for giving us the opportunity. And if you do have any questions, I think we're about right on time here. If you do have any questions that Rosemary did not have time to answer or couldn't answer while you were online, please feel free to email us. But do give me a couple days to get back to you. I do have quite a few fosters in residence right now. So again, thank you for taking the time. I hope this has been helpful to you, and please feel free to, or please do, go back and watch the first webinar if you haven't had a chance, and plan to join us for the next two. Thank you again.